you saw, in the Obama-Hillary race where it all came down to Iraq. It was a secondary issue. You did see Biden get pushed on a couple of things that were changes from the Obama policy. So his official position, this is Tony Blinken's position, according to the testimony yesterday, is pretty hostile to Saudi Arabia, which is a new position, one that the Obama administration did not hold. There's momentum for cutting off support for the Saudis' intervention in Yemen. You see some of that, but you didn't see it as a huge issue. I mean, I remember in some of the ancillary issues the president worked on, like moving the U.S. embassy to Jerusalem, I'd find sometimes I was the first reporter to ask a candidate what they thought of it. Just burning with people.
Attention!
I was quieting down because there's I don't want to talk over the ceremony, which got loud for a second.
We appreciate that, Dave. It got loud because we are seeing the president and vice president arrive. We saw their spouses take their places there near the tomb of the unknown soldier. Attending this wreath-laying ceremony, of course, former presidents Bill Clinton, George W. Bush, Barack Obama, and their spouses. This is taking place at Arlington National Cemetery, someplace that is so close geographically to Washington, D.C., a place that presidents often go on the meaningful moments of America as we honor the military and honor those lost. And we'll watch now as the president and vice president arrive.
Present arms! Order! Arms!
President, Vice President, please come back to the spot.
Present
President, I would ask you to please return to that place. Vice President, please. All the way up the steps to the President, please.
This is live coverage from the Washington Post, the tomb of the unknown soldier. Let's go to Dave Weigel for the significance of this moment, Dave, of the Biden-Harris team choosing to make this trip to Arlington National Cemetery, so close to Washington, D.C., and yet in Virginia, in some ways a world away. Someplace so significant to the hearts and minds of many Americans because of all of the soldiers and those who have served who are buried there and remembered there. Talk about their reasoning for doing this today.
Well, this is what we're seeing is fairly traditional. You don't always see this level of involvement from former presidents, but a laying of the wreath, this happens sometimes in these ceremonies. But all of the Biden events have had an undertone of kind of not regret, but sort of a Gothic feel to them, and they very much reflect Joe Biden's approach to politics. I mean, everything and this has been written about, but the tragedy that defined his career as soon as he got elected to the Senate, the tragedy of the death of his son, Beau. I mean, he is somebody who emotes very readily, who cries, apologizes for crying, apologizes for getting emotional, stops from winding himself up. And key to his victory, I think, was that he always approached the pandemic as a crisis, an individual, person-by-person crisis that was ruining people's lives and taking members of their family, and had an empathy that just never came easily to Donald Trump. But it doesn't come that easily to many politicians. I mean, Joe Biden as sort of national national eulogist, national healer, that's a role that you could tell he was very ready to play. And even in the setup of this event, from the ceremony last night, there are tools available to you as a president, pomp, ceremony, resources that you can use, and sometimes they are kind of clunky and don't come off, and sometimes they're powerful. But the president was just so much more interested, the former President Trump was so much more interested in having a big rally that he really didn't use those tools to a fault. I mean, he was having rallies at the point where they were really unpopular with most voters, and couldn't believe that Biden was benefiting from treating COVID like a crisis that would require him to stay at home, that require normal people who were not running for president to stay at home. So anytime you see some of these events, even if they are this or that ceremony, this or that memorial service is a little bit traditional, you can see what Biden imbues in it. I mean, he very much wears his heart on his sleeve, and you already see Republicans getting used to him being president. I guess more in the media than Republicans who will have to work with him, wondering how sincere it is. I mean, if you ever cover Joe Biden, this has always been who he is. He really throws himself into the mourning role of the presidency and the ceremonial role.
Let's bring Robert Samuels into the conversation, national political reporter. Robert, one of the stories you've covered over the past year is the coronavirus, and in particular, the coronavirus's devastating effects on Black communities in our country. This is one of the big challenges that faces the Biden-Harris administration.
That's correct. Joe Biden is entering the presidency not only with a country that is still mourning the deaths of people who have died from the coronavirus, but a disease that has disproportionately taken the lives of Black, Latino, and Native Americans, sometimes at 2 to 3 times the rate as white Americans. So this is a time where the entire country is mourning. But if you live in a community that's Black or Latino, you're seeing something very distinct, not just knowing that you've lost a friend, a family member, a basketball coach, maybe a police lieutenant in some communities, but also that there have been deleterious economic effects to your community that will take a very long time to heal.
James, on that note, as Robert so importantly makes the connection between the economy and the losses of coronavirus, it's sort of remarkable that it was so hard for the Trump administration to connect health success with economic success, right? They really tried to pit the two against each other. So how does President Biden communicate effectively to Americans that they need to go hand in hand, that health success can equal economic success and vice versa?
Yeah, it's not an either or, and I think Americans get that intellectually, Libby. They get it. That it's not a one or another thing, and Trump tried to make it a one or another, either or, in part because he wanted Biden to be on the side of don't do anything, shut everything down, which Biden has not been. Biden is promising to reopen the majority of K-8 schools by the end of his first 100 days, which is a nod to parents wanting to get their kids back in school, and so I think Biden has to, one, prioritize the vaccine distribution. That's first and foremost. He has to get that right. He has to improve what's been going on. It's been a very dysfunctional process. They're going to have to use the Defense Production Act to get a hold of some of the raw materials, which are going to be the next big holdup in vaccine production. They're going to have to push the states, not only give them the funding they need to distribute, but make sure that states that are not doing it right are getting penalized, and that states that are doing it right are getting rewarded. There are ways to improve this. Even today, the Biden folks pushed Jerome Adams, the Surgeon General, to resign, and even before their new Surgeon General is confirmed. So that's first and foremost, is get that rollout better. But the second is showing that they are giving help for people who are out of work because of the pandemic, that they're not going to punish people. There's something, a small thing I want to say here that I've thought of often. I was up in Wilmington for the Democratic convention covering it, and one of the things the Biden folks did was they make everyone get COVID tested when they come into the bubble and the perimeter and all that. And they had people, workmen, not political people, but workmen, coming to build the stages for the event in Wilmington. And there were a couple of guys who tested positive when they got tested when they arrived to do a week of work in setting up the stage. And the Biden campaign said, look, you have tested positive for COVID. We can't have you here. You need to leave, but we're going to still pay you your full salary for the week of work that you would have done, so that you're not going to be out anything for getting COVID. And it really meant a lot. I was talking to some of the workers, again, blue collar folks, that the Biden folks still paid those guys. And I think that Biden is trying to do something that kind of in miniature, but for the whole country, in aggregate. And that's what he's really asking for in the $1.9 trillion that he's asking Congress for, which he says is a down payment to ask for even more. Anyway, I think doing those kinds of things shows that it's not either or, that it is a false choice to choose between focusing on public health and focusing on getting our economy back on track.
Let's go to Dave Weigel for more on that, Dave. In the final stretch of the campaign, how much were you hearing from people about their concerns of COVID? Like, were voters you were talking to able to see, health of Americans and the economy as sort of hand in hand, or had they bought into the idea that they're competing with each other?
Well, it was very divided. I didn't hear much of the second opinion from Trump voters. I did hear a following of the path Trump set, which was that it was annoying that businesses were closed. It was annoying to wear a mask. States need to open up. I mean, the president led with this position that COVID would go away if you just willed it hard enough to, and that was convincing to 46.9% of the country. I did not hear any purchase for that argument, that idea with Democrats at all. And I think it got actually worse for the president in the transition period. This is something I'm kind of obsessed with because it's unusual for a president to lose this much clout in between losing the election and losing the presidency. Usually he tries to burnish his legacy. The president took credit for the fact that a vaccine existed and then bungled the handling of it, which I think added a lot of worry and a lot of angst to people. They thought, you remember how you felt if you're watching this. When you heard there was a vaccine approved by the FDA, maybe it's over. The Trump approach was more kind of let's just come up with things that are going to shrink this problem, make it go away. The Biden approach that this was, I think he waited as long as he could to return back to the trail, not just because it was working for him, but because his voters and their polling showed it, really did think we were not going to get out of this and back to a normal economy, back to a normal country without the virus getting taken care of. So, I mean, even though maybe it wasn't the dominating topic of the last 2 weeks, the Biden taking the reins from Trump and focusing on the vaccination plan, I think you can expect Biden to just emphasize this almost every day, what is being done, how many people are being vaccinated, just make it the mission of the presidency. And his voters thought, yes, that was what the next president should be doing. His main focus should be this. You did have majority, I'm sure, of the president's voters, if not all of them, thinking the opposite, that it just is, this is a bigger, everything from there is no COVID, it's a conspiracy theory, to, well, sure there is, but we just need, the kind of Alex Bennett's in a way, we just need to deal with it. Maybe some people get sick and die. We need herd immunity. That was just not the position that won the election, and it certainly wasn't the one that instilled faith in Trump in the last few weeks.
Thank you so much, Dave. I want to bring Joyce Koh back into the conversation. She joins us live from the White House, the scene of a lot of transition and activity this afternoon. Joyce, you spent a lot of time covering the Biden campaign last year. So talk to us about how he was able to show Americans and convince Americans that he was the right candidate for this moment.
Well, Libby, like we've talked about several times today, Biden will be inheriting a deeply divided nation. And that is something that he has recognized, not just today in his inaugural speech, but numerous times throughout his campaign, as well as the first time we really saw him announce his candidacy for his run for president. He came out and he talked about the Unite the Right rally in Charlottesville, and how that was a moment when he realized that he, wanted to run for president and, as he says, heal the soul of the nation. So he constantly speaks to the times that we are in right now, and that's sort of one reason. Another thing is that he has spent so many years in politics, nearly 5 decades. He has a deep knowledge of how government in both the legislative and the executive branch work. Of course, he spent 8 years in the White House, 36 years as the Delaware senator. So, as we've seen over the course of the last 3 months in this transition period, if you'll call it that, he has been able to sort of have an understanding of how things work, despite the fact that he has not had a traditional transition. In addition to that, frankly, he is focused on the issues that are pressing to Americans. He's squarely focused on the coronavirus, and as that relates to building the economy back up, as unemployment is still fairly high, as this pandemic rages with nearly 200,000 new cases. That's the average right now, daily new cases. So he is focused on the issues that are concerning, most pressing to the American people right now. Libby?
So, Joyce, what stood out to you from the inaugural address?
Well, one thing that has constantly sort of struck me about Biden, whether it is on the campaign trail or listening to his speeches, is this level of optimism that he has. And it is not a naive optimism. He's spent 5 decades in politics, but it is one that he is, he sees the good in America. He sees the good in people. And today, that's what we heard from the inaugural address. He said, quote, "The American story depends not on any one of us, not on some of us, but on all of us, on we the people who seek a more perfect union." He went on to say, "This is a great nation. We are good people." It's a simple message, but one that I think many Americans have been waiting to hear, as Biden tries to unite this country after really inheriting a divided country. And the idea of national unity, you know, is one that he will continue to make, I'm sure, as he you know, starts his first 100 days in office, and he has served nearly 5 decades in politics. So it's one where he comes into the position with just this depth of knowledge on politics and government, as well as sort of having the pulse on the American people. Libby?
Thanks so much. Joyce Coe, live at the White House. And you'll hear in just a moment that cannon fire, the signal of the president's departure from Arlington. Rhonda Colvin, let's talk about what else is to come this afternoon. 3 o'clock here on the East Coast, just about 3 hours after President Biden was sworn in, 3 hours after the official transfer of power. So there's still a lot to happen yet today. What's next?
It really is a day chock full of all sorts of festivities. So what's next right now is this virtual parade. So the planners from the inaugural committee decided to do the majority of the parade virtually. They said early on that they did not want crowds in D.C. because of the virus and because of social distancing. So they're offering up a very ambitious virtual parade that will feature bands and entertainers from across the country. That's going to be happening in the 3 o'clock hour. So that might be, if people were with us and watched the Democratic National Convention, it may be sort of in that same vein, where you will see vignettes and performances, but it'll all be done virtually. And then from there, politics-wise, there is some other things happening. There will be the swearing in of the 2 Georgia senators, Raphael Warnock and John Ossoff. They will be sworn in by Kamala Harris as one of her first duties as vice president. And then also she will be swearing in her replacement, Alex Padilla, who is also the first Latino senator from the state of California, if you can believe it. So there's so many firsts today, and that'll be happening in the 4 o'clock hour. And then later on today, of course, there will be that primetime special that will be broadcasted and hosted by Tom Hanks. Kerry Washington is also involved with that, Eva Longoria, and you'll see performers. Justin Timberlake, I believe, is one of the performers on the list, and it's just going to be something that's in place of what we would have expected from a ball. There isn't an inaugural ball like we might have seen in past administrations, but this is going to be an event that the planners want to continue that excitement of the day. And then even tomorrow, the inaugural committee has a national prayer service that will be hosted by the National Cathedral here in Washington, D.C. That'll take place tomorrow morning. So that's also a part of the week's events. But they've sort of put in so much in today's schedule, both these somber moments like what we've just witnessed at Arlington, and also some lighthearted moments as well.
Thanks so much, Rhonda. And to that end, we'll see in just a little while the University of Delaware Drumline and Howard University Showtime Marching Band. They're coming up soon, so stay with us. We'll be right back.
I made a business out of my passion. I mean, who doesn't love obsessing over network security?
Glitchy video calls with regional offices, that's my thing.
Do the things you love. Our people and network will help do the things you don't. Let's take care of business. AT&T.
I'm Lillian Cunningham, the creator and host of the Presidential Podcast. Joe Biden, Donald Trump, Barack Obama, George W. Bush, all the presidential inaugurations that we live through these days, in fact, all of the inaugurations dating back to 1937 share a few key things in common. 1, they all take place at the Capitol. 2, the swearing in is presided over by the Chief Justice of the Supreme Court. And 3, they always take place on January 20th. But that was not always the case. For roughly the first 150 years of American history, Inauguration Day was actually March 4th. This meant that a president-elect waited about 6 months before he was inaugurated. And in the case of the new Congress, they waited about 13 months. They would be elected in November, and then they wouldn't start their term until the next December. Well, this presented a number of governing issues, as you can imagine, during these long lame duck sessions. So, by the 1930s, the Congress decided to pass a new constitutional amendment, the 20th Amendment. And what it did was it reset all of the start dates for the presidency and new members of Congress to January. So ever since then, the presidential inauguration has taken place on January 20th instead of March 4th, which has significantly shortened the amount of time between Election Day and Inauguration Day.
You're watching a Washington Post special report on this Inauguration Day in America. I'm Libby Casey, and you can see there the Treasury Department and right downtown in Washington where the bands are preparing to march. One element of the parade that is still being kept, that's not going virtual, and we'll hear more about how meaningful these marching bands are in just a moment. Joseph R. Biden was sworn in today as the 46th President of the United States. President Biden used his inaugural address to seek unity and healing for a country facing many challenges. Biden called on the nation to end its uncivil war and said that unity is the path forward. With me now, Dave Weigel, Rhonda Colvin, James Homan, also Robert Samuels. Robert, you did a profile of Kamala Harris, digging into her history and her personal story that was just so fascinating and reflective of really the American story for so many people. Tell us about Kamala Devi Harris.
Well, Kamala Harris is indicative and illustrative of the multicultural blend that characterizes America. Here you have a woman, she's a native of California, but is the daughter of two immigrants. One, her mother, Shamala, who was a cancer researcher and made great strides in the fight to defeat breast cancer before succumbing to cancer herself in 2009. And her father, Donald Harris, who came from the island of Jamaica and became a prominent economist who believed and perpetuated theories about the economy that were seen as revolutionary and counterculture in the American experience, and still has a big hand in how the Jamaican economy progresses today. Those two cultures live within her, along with the experience of living as a Black American. Even though her parents divorced, her mother made sure that she understood her identity in society as a Black American because she knew that's how society would treat her. So she went to a Black preschool. She eventually integrated schools as a child, and then she went to Howard University, a historically Black college that's prominent and well known to follow in the footsteps of Thurgood Marshall. And interestingly enough, we saw her put her hand on Thurgood Marshall's Bible today, as she became the first Black person, the first Asian person, and the first woman to become vice president.
Rhonda Colvin, another first that we're seeing is this blended family of Kamala Harris. She's a stepmother. Her husband, Doug Emhoff, had a first marriage, and we know that the children call her Mamala. So, Rhonda, Americans can see themselves reflected in this family.
That's right, and her husband, Doug Emhoff, the second gentleman, he is of Jewish heritage. They have relatives in Italy. They have relatives, of course, in India. And it just is really an illustration of many families in the United States right now who are multicultural. So that's another element of what Kamala Harris will be bringing to her position, is this sense of a growing majority of multicultural households. And you're right, she also, her children are her stepchildren. And I believe Sydney Trent, one of our colleagues, wrote a great piece a few weeks back about how it's a symbol of the fact that she is married to a white man who will now be her partner in this next chapter in her life, and what that might mean for diversity in America. So it's really just an interesting angle to her whole experience today, that she is bringing this multiculturalism forward to many people who are watching today, children who are biracial and from families that look a lot like hers.
Robert, tell us more about Kamala Harris's childhood visits to Jamaica and how she connected with those cultural roots.
Well, Donald Harris, her father, was a proud Jamaican as a person of Jamaican heritage. I can tell you that comes with the deal. And when they were growing up, he knew that this was a particular part of her culture that she might not be able to get in Northern California. So when she was a child, she'd go with him to the island of Jamaica. They're from a tiny parish called St. Anne, which is also the same parish Bob Marley was from. And they come from a family of merchants in an area called Brownstown. Now, Brownstown's a rural area with bustling markets, and Kamala Harris's great-grandmother used to run one of those markets. And when her great-grandmother couldn't do it anymore, she handed that market over to her sons, including Kamala Harris's grandfather, Oscar Harris. Now, on those trips to Jamaica, the Harris family made sure she understood the family history. She visited the local sugarcane farm. They taught her about the secrets of Jamaican cuisine. She learned about curry goat and jerk chicken. And one of the things that we talked about was there was a lot of hesitance with the Harris campaign to speak about her father. There's a bit of a strain in the relationship due to her father not wanting much attention at 82 years old. And there were questions within the Caribbean diaspora about how Jamaican Kamala Harris is, because again, it's a very proud culture. And one of the things Kamala Harris shared with me is that she has beef patties in her freezer in her current condo before she moves to the Naval Observatory, which for a Jamaican person is one of the things that you always have. You always have a reserve of beef patties. And for a lot of people, that was one of the indicators that she understood this particular part of herself.
James Homan, I was driving by the Naval Observatory the other day with my 4-year-old daughter and was telling her that a woman would soon live there and serve as the vice president. And I don't think my 4-year-old had realized before this year that women couldn't be president or vice president. Let's talk about the symbolism of her role here in this high office.
Yeah, and that it's important, to reflect on that, because your daughter is going to grow up in a world where that is totally normal and acceptable. And I've actually received several texts from friends I went to college with or throughout the country of their daughters, watching proudly as Kamala Harris was sworn in and smiling and regardless of your politics or ideology, that is really cool. And it is something that shows that the American story is unfinished, and we still have to crack that ultimate glass ceiling. And so I think what Robert said was so interesting, just in terms of all the different boxes that she checks with her Jamaican ties and her Indian ties and her ties to HBCUs. And so there's a lot of communities that are very excited that even the women we saw earlier that one of our colleagues was talking to, who were wearing the Chucks and Pearls t-shirts. She just is excited a lot of people who see themselves and have never seen anyone but a white man as vice president. And the symbolic power of the presidency is so important. And it's something that, Trump was a reality TV showman. He understood, he understands television maybe better than anyone who ever held the office. But I don't think he understood the import of his words that when he talked about go home with the members of the squad, including 3 people who were born in places like Cincinnati, Detroit, and Minneapolis, that how hurtful those words were to young people and young people of color. And so the pendulum is swinging now, and I think it is hugely significant. Obviously, it was a major milestone when Barack Obama became president, but this adds a new layer of nuance to that.
Dave Weigel, how much did Kamala Harris talk about her identity and her heritage on the campaign trail? How much was she trying to connect with voters based on her own personal story and experiences?
Quite a lot. It ran through her campaign, and it actually, in the conversation Democrats had throughout that primary in Iowa and New Hampshire, there was a lot of pride in the diversity of the field generally, the diversity that Kamala Harris brought to the field specifically, but then worry, because Donald Trump had won in 2016, worry that the country wasn't going to go along for that kind of conversation. So it came up, but she didn't lead with every speech with it. It was just the premise of a lot of her campaign was, imagine replacing this president with somebody with an immigrant story whose relatives, who's not that very distant relatives of the sort of people that the president would kick out of the country. So it was part of that. I think it's a question going forward of how much that Biden leans into that, because frankly, as an old white guy who considers himself very progressive on racial issues, he has leaned in a lot more on this objectively than Barack Obama did, and arguably more than Kamala Harris did in the primary. I mean, he had mentions of not just racial discrimination, fighting white supremacy in his inauguration speech, which is go back and look at other speeches. That doesn't come up that often, not white supremacy, but even talked about a 400-year reckoning on racial justice. Now, this was after the outgoing administration spent all this time attacking the 1619 Project. Biden brings it right to the forefront. So that is an irony that a lot of Democrats were aware of in the campaign. Is whatever pride they had in candidates like Cory Booker, Kamala Harris, Andrew Yang, electing a female president, they kind of sublimated them, thinking that Biden was more electable. And then kind of with that, voters, Biden ran a very racially progressive and upfront campaign. You can tell in just the support he's gotten with people who by no means had him as their first choice on the cultural left. He still has a lot of skeptics on the economic policy, the socialist left. But a lot of people who thought, do we really want to go all in for an old white guy, became very impressed by the way he approached this in the campaign.
Let's go to the parade route now and check in with our colleague, Nicole Ellis. So, Nicole, what's happening there?
Libby, the parade is beginning to line up. We're going to see a lot of really interesting and dynamic performances and people here. So we're expecting to see the United States Coast Guard Band, the U.S. Marine Corps Silent Drill Platoon. We're also going to see a few specific individuals that really kind of reflect the American experience right now. One of them is Kathy Cluck, who is an AP U.S. history teacher from Austin, Texas, who took a trip across the country for 2 weeks to show her students history where it happened. Another is Jason Zonk, a 12-year-old Atlanta trumpeter who would perform for healthcare workers on their breaks in Georgia. We'll also, as you've heard and mentioned before, the president and vice president escort will include the Delaware drumline as well as the Howard University drumline. So they're going to actually come up 15th Street right behind me and come all the way into the White House, all the way up to the White House, which is to my left, and so it will likely get very loud very soon, and should be a pretty interesting experience here. There'll also be representation from every part of the military. As I mentioned earlier, I've actually been talking to people from police forces all across the country, from Illinois to Greensboro to Brazos County, Texas, some of which who have been here before, but others who this is their first time covering inauguration. And it's also created this unique kind of camaraderie among people who are dedicated to serving and protecting their cities, their states, and our country at this very moment, and are our incoming president and vice president. So it's one of those moments where, you know, they get to meet each other and also share in this moment and shared career path of this desire to defend country and state. So it'll be really interesting to see as things unfold. I'm sure it will get very, very loud very soon. It's starting to get very bright as we see the police escorts in their motorcycles lighting up the street. We'll keep you posted as things unfold here.
All right, thank you so much, Nicole Ellis. Robert Samuels, let's circle back to this conversation we were having with Dave Weigel about Joe Biden and his positions on race, his history of politics and race and that intersection, Robert.
Well, I think it's really important when you talk about the Joe Biden campaign and his history as a politician is it starts in the Black community. He was able to get his first seat on the county council in Delaware because he went into Black neighborhoods, housing projects, and asked for their votes at a time when the Democratic Party was not doing that. And he relied on friends he made at a pool that he used to serve in as a lifeguard in Wilmington. Now, when Joe Biden used to speak to the NAACP, he would always say, "You never forget the people who brought you to the dance." And the Black community brought Joe Biden to the dance from the very beginnings of his politics in 1970. And it was interesting to hear him echo those lines when he became the president-elect and the election was called for him. And what he did in terms of bringing a Black woman along as a vice president when that particular segment had been so crucial to his election, both getting him out of the primary when he was floundering and then boosting his numbers in places like Georgia, was in tribute to that. And I must also say that for people in this country who grew up in families like mine, who have parents and relatives who speak with accents, who've heard the questioning of people about your Americanness, how you fit into the story. I think today, in both the swearing in of Kamala Harris, the nod to lift every voice and sing, the prayer from a pastor from an AME church, it reaffirmed the Americanness of many types of people. And after considering some of the things we saw in the Trump administration, the racist language, the fanning of those flames from Charlottesville to what we saw in the Capitol building a few weeks ago, that was not only a sigh of relief, but a hope for a more prosperous future.
James Hohmann, just reflecting on Robert's eloquent words, you know, and hearkening back to something Dave Weigel was talking about earlier, Joe Biden just acknowledging the history of America and its dark history, its complex history, its terrible history in some ways, at the same time that he talks about optimism and a beautiful America, is so different than what we heard from the Trump administration. So James, can you explain to us like how the Trump administration went out with their attempts to really change the way Americans view history and perhaps even are taught history?
Yeah, Libby, and it's such a great question, and it really does dovetail so well. You know what? You don't have to tell a triumphal story to still think America's great. America has gotten through these dark chapters, and we still have work to do. It's totally consistent to call out our original sin of slavery and to still celebrate the good things that America has done. And Donald Trump saw things in black and white and couldn't see the gray. And you're absolutely right. This week has been a really good reflection of that, which is Trump created this 1776 commission and put a bunch of kind of the lunatic fringe of the radical far right, people who could never get hired at good universities from kind of random schools. And they all wrote this report. And it's the 1776 report. And it is comically terrible. It compares progressivism to fascism. And then Trump signed an executive order earlier this week saying that there should be a garden of statues to celebrate American greatness. And it was this bizarre list of people who Trump said should get statues in their honor. A lot of conservative figures, but a lot of random figures. And that ultimately is not going to happen. And in fact, one of the things that historians observed was that one of the first things Biden did after he became president was the Biden team shut down the website for the Trump Historical Commission, the 1776 Commission. And they only put out their report on Monday. And the Biden team took down their site and dissolved this commission, which a lot of historians have really spoken out against as sort of a perversion of American history. And Biden's inauguration address was good in the sense that it captured this idea that there's always this struggle between our angels and our demons, and sometimes the demons have won out, and it's not always preordained that the angels are going to win out, but that all Americans should want to be on the side of the angels.
We're watching the parade begin here, the parade celebrating the inauguration of Joe Biden and Kamala Harris, the 46th president of the United States and a vice president, breaking many barriers in America. Let's return now to the National Mall and Hannah Jewell, national video reporter. So Hannah, talk about how surreal the last 2 days of coverage have been.
Well, it's been very surreal, as you say. It's been eerie out here. It's at times been tense just thinking about the necessity of all this security. And right now it's actually quite lonely because even the National Guard are packing up to leave on those buses over my shoulder there. So the fences, though, remain. The fences that are so complicated that it took one local reporter, I believe, 7 hours to make it here from this morning to make it inside this cordon. So the fences remain, and also these flags remain, representing those from across the country who couldn't make it here tonight. And it is a shame that this quite incredible art display cannot be seen in person by Washingtonians or indeed people from around the country. And although it never would have been a normal inauguration in a pandemic, it wouldn't have been safe to have huge crowds here. You can imagine that if it weren't for the events of January 6th, there could have still been a way for maybe locals to come and visit and to see this. But tonight there will be the flags will be lit up with these big pillars of light that you can actually see all over Washington. So even if people can't get anywhere near this spot, you may be able to see, if you are local, these great columns of light representing the states, territories, and the district itself of the United States. So it is somber. I have been thinking at the end of the day today, but a shame it is that supporters couldn't come, but also that even President Biden's detractors couldn't be here to peacefully protest this, because that was no longer an option after the insurrection 2 weeks ago. And that's a crazy sentence to say, honestly, and it's hard to imagine telling myself that a year ago, even 2 years or ever. And hopefully we won't have to say that again, Libby.
Thank you so much, Hannah Jewell. Let's go to Nicole Ellis, who's along the parade route. Nicole.
That's right, Libby. I am just along the parade route. The Coast Guard band and the U.S. Marine Corps silent platoon just passed. As you can see, the parade is still ongoing behind me. I'm just going to let you take a look here. Actually, there's a little gap right now, but you'll see some really dynamic and different sort of parts of the parade. I'm sorry, this is my first inauguration, so I'm catching up on this myself, but I want to give you an opportunity to take a look at this as I take it in as well.
Enthusiasm about the parade. It is patriotic. It has these military bands present, but this is such a small footprint compared to what we usually see when we have young people from all over the country coming to Washington, D.C., James, to be a part of a parade like this. That's not what we're seeing this year.
Yeah, and Libby, you often hear stories from people who will tell you, I spent a lot of time in the non-COVID times traveling the country for work, and you'll meet people at events who will tell you fondly about the time that their high school got to perform in the inaugural parade of 19 whatever, and that is an experience that, you know, we're obviously getting a lot of pomp and circumstance, but you know, there usually is a lot more. Yeah. And usually the other element of it, Libby, is that a lot of Washingtonians usually line the parade route. And so, you know, you would normally see, and whether it's a Republican or Democrat, you know, George W. Bush famously did the hook 'em horns signal to the University of Texas marching band when he was inaugurated for his second term in January 2005, and it turned out that that's actually a symbol in like Norway for some very offensive cult, and it's caused like a little international kerfuffle because the world is watching, and you know it's unfortunate that a lot of young women and aren't able to kind of be there to watch the parade with the first female vice president. So it normally is this very democratized way for a lot of people to feel like they participated in the inaugural and the transfer of power. And there's been a long-running thing where like Al Roker on NBC would run up to the new president and do a little like walk and talk as they walk down the parade route. That's not happening this year. You know, Barack Obama in 2009 famously got out of his limousine to walk the parade route and engage with people in the crowd. So this is very, very different than that, and you can see just the size of the motorcade is bigger than ever before, and that projects something that I think is in some ways very at odds with what is usually projected, which is this is the people's swearing in, and so it's unfortunate we're not seeing that piece of it.
Rhonda Colvin, so much of what we're seeing today, of course, has been created for the viewers at home. The recognition by the Biden-Harris transition team that they needed to make a COVID-safe, a relatively COVID-safe production. And, you know, one hope is that a lot of young people are watching today because they're at home, right? Because unfortunately, they're having to do their remote learning at home because of COVID in-person school restrictions. So a lot of what we're going to be seeing this afternoon is catering and created for our audience as well as millions of other people who are watching both this part of the parade, Rhonda, as well as the virtual parade we'll see soon.
Right, and that has been a part of the thinking in the within the Inauguration Committee. In fact, earlier this morning at 10 a.m., there was a special for children to watch, and there was a special address by Jill Biden, as well as a presidential historian who discussed what Inauguration Day is. So there was an element in the planning today thinking about children and thinking about this being a teachable moment. And you're right, when things are virtual, they can be viewed by anyone at any time in the comfort of their own home, and that was a part of the thinking of the planners of this event. And of course, when you have an administration coming in knowing their first order of business right now is to tackle a virus that is out of control here in the United States, they certainly could not have done a parade with a bunch of people or even allowed it to happen when they are trying to tell the American people that this is still very much a very serious threat here. So this is certainly historic in its own right, because I don't think there ever has been a partially virtual parade. So this is something that we're all taking in here for the first time.
You can see the University of Delaware drumline, and they are appearing right before the Beast. That's that bulletproof vehicle that 46, as he'll be known, the 46th President of the United States rides in. Let's go to Nicole Ellis along the parade route. Nicole?
Yes, Olivia, as you can see, 46, or the Beast as you called it, the limousine and several others are on their way down the street. And something that you and James mentioned earlier is how markedly different this is because the public is just not here. You know, in front of us, behind us, normally we may be competing with civilians and people who are here to celebrate and be a part of this moment. But the streets are completely empty outside of law enforcement. We just also saw, as you mentioned, the University of Delaware drumline, also the Old Guard, which is the 3rd U.S. Infantry, among other groups. We're expecting to see the Howard drumline. I can actually see the flags waving beyond the limousines just behind us. So that should be coming up, and I'm sure will be loud, a celebration and performance largely for the families at home, because those of us who are here are only really media and law enforcement. And it's a unique experience as a reporter, because we really can't talk to the public and hear from them about what this experience is like, or be a part of those teachable moments that undoubtedly play a role in how some of the young people that would normally be here take in this moment. So unfortunate in that sense, both because of the pandemic and because of these security concerns as a result of the insurrection 2 weeks ago, but undoubtedly, the determination to see this through still affords us a unique opportunity to take in the people swearing in.
Thanks so much, Nicole. Rhonda Colvin, the drum lines and seeing the drum corps is such a moment of exuberance and joy. And Nicole Ellis is our eyes and ears down there. What a moment for her to be there to witness this history and also share it with all of us and our audience. But Rhonda, talk to us about the significance of seeing the University of Delaware and Howard University represented today.
Well, very close to the hearts of the president and vice president. With Howard, of course, that is a school right here in Washington, D.C. It's an HBCU, and it's where Kamala Harris attended for her undergrad, and she has often talked about her days at Howard. She was a part of the Alpha Kappa Alpha sorority there, and she has, talked to and had events with her, virtual events with her sorority sisters since becoming the vice presidential nominee. So this is a part of what we're seeing, is also a part of us getting a sense of who these two individuals are, what has shaped them, what are their personal experiences before they made it to politics. So this is just another moment of them injecting their personal histories, introducing themselves to America. For Joe Biden, America has known him for almost 40 years as a senator and, of course, a vice president. Kamala Harris, she has only been in the Senate since 2016. So while the United States is very familiar with her now, I think this is still a part of the introduction to who she is. And it also goes to a point that I've made before on some of our shows, talking about her identity as a multicultural woman. She has always been upfront about that history and saying that it is what shaped her. If you remember her speech when she accepted the official nomination as the vice president at the DNC, she spent a lot of time in the beginning of her speech talking about the fact that she comes from a multicultural background and is currently, her current home with her husband and stepchildren is a multicultural home. So she has definitely not shied away from mentioning her roots and talking about how they have shaped her. And I think that that's something that is also showing a level of progress for this country, because when you think about Barack Obama as the first black president, back in the early days of his first campaign, his advisors didn't really know what to do with race. They didn't know if they should talk about it overtly, how they should mention it, because they knew there is a segment of the American electorate who would not want to vote for him because he was a black man. So they tried to figure out a delicate dance of how to talk about race. And now we're having a vice president who is very upfront about race and her identity being what made her to be who she is right now.
Rhonda, another model that the first family and the second family are showing Americans is the powerful role of the stepmother. Jill Biden, a stepmother to Beau and Hunter. Kamala Harris, a stepmother to Doug Emhoff's children. Showing, stepmothers are so often painted in children's stories as these sort of evil characters, but we're seeing here these successful, loving families represent America in just their very being.
That's right. That also is a part of some of the non-traditional family structures that you often see represented in the presidency and vice presidency, that they are stepmothers. And you've heard Jill Biden talk about when she started to get to know Joe Biden when she was dating him and got to know his sons and immediately fell into that mother role. And then for Kamala Harris, on the trail, she often talked about how her stepchildren call her Mamala, and how she is very close with them, that she helped them move into their college dorms. And while she may not have her own biological family children, she still talks about that role of being a mother for them, and how special that is for her, as well as so many American women out there who may be raising children that they did not birth themselves, but have structured a very tight-knit home base.
Yeah, James Homan, a shout out to the stepmoms out there.
Yeah, shout out to the stepmoms. I have one, and it is a very untraditional role, and it is, that it is kind of remarkable that we've challenged so many stereotypes that have been so built in, and it does give a lot of people something to identify with. And I was actually struck over Christmas. Doug Emhoff and Kamala Harris recorded a video, and they said, I want to give a shout out on this Christmas to all the single people out there who are alone this Christmas during COVID, and you're not alone and you're cared for. And it's just so unusual to see politicians being thoughtful that way about, that's a community that's often ignored. And you wouldn't normally get a shout out. And I think it's a result of kind of Kamala Harris's unique background that she would think to say something like that. And it does mean that more people writ large feel kind of seen and heard.
Let's bring into the conversation Holly Bailey, national political reporter. Holly, thank you so much for joining us. We've been seeing images all day of this heavy security footprint, but Washington, D.C. isn't the only city in America on high alert right now. Talk to us about other state capitals around the country.
Thanks so much for having me. And yeah, it's been actually a tense few days at state capitals across the country. There have been threats of armed protest, and we've seen across the country a real show of law enforcement. I'm in Minnesota right now, and there have been a line of state patrol officers and National Guard members guarding the state capitol for many days. But what's been happening is there's really been nothing to report on. There's been a smattering of protests, but no real threats that we've seen. And in fact, just judging from some of the feeds that we've had from local reporters across the country, there were a handful of Trump supporters who showed up today and were surprised to not find anyone at these state capitals. So it's been pretty quiet today.
So in other words, Holly, a handful of people came out to protest and found no one else there.
Right. And, again, this is a much rosier, it's a different scene than what some law enforcement officials have been worried about in recent days. And just to say, that's not to say that there couldn't be more developments in coming days. And we know that several state officials across the country have said that they're going to keep police and Capitol Police and other law enforcement around state capitals just in case something happens. But everything that we had been fearing, sort of similar scenes to what you saw at the U.S. Capitol unfolding at state capitals, that just hasn't happened.
We're seeing President Biden and the First Lady Jill Biden exit that limousine there with the 46 plates. So Holly, what will you be watching for in the coming days? What is law enforcement still being proactive about, and what will you be following?
Well, there's been, I'm based in Minnesota, and we saw, just reporting on the ground here, a lot of groups that had been out, having near weekly protests after the election had warned their supporters to stay away from the capitals this weekend, and in fact to wait until after the inauguration. So I think, one of the things I'm looking for is, do we see any more massive protests after, the inauguration in coming days. I know a lot of people have complained, a lot of conservatives have complained that they've been shut off from social media and they're unable to talk to one another, and that they're scared of getting arrested if they show up and are complaining of their free speech being violated. So we're going to just have to wait and see what happens. But I know law enforcement, just talking to people on the ground here in Minnesota, they've been very on edge, and they're going to keep an eye out for something to happen.
Holly Bailey joining us live. You now see President Biden, the First Lady Jill Biden, walking to their new home. Rhonda walking to the White House where they will live. And I have to say, we talk about fashion at a moment like this because the fashion can reflect politics and culture. Joe Biden wearing Ralph Lauren, American designer, obviously. Rhonda, this is the day the coats are winning. The coats are gorgeous today. And I got to say, Rhonda, yours is no exception. You look amazing as well. I want you to talk us through, Rhonda, what this family will find when they get to the White House today.
Well, they will find their new residence, and it is quickly, I think we talked about this a little earlier, it is quickly turned over from one administration to the next, where the cleaning crews come in, they change up everything, they put all the furniture appointments that the Bidens would want in the residence in place, and so it is a quick turnaround from the crew over at the residence in the White House, and they will be entering, they will be seeing that as President and First Lady for the first time. It is something that is usually a part of the usual transition where the outgoing First Lady and the incoming First Lady have a coffee, and the outgoing First Lady introduces some of the staffers, the chef, to the new family. We know that did not happen. That was a part of today's abnormal beginnings, but they will be entering their new home, and Jill Biden, you mentioned her outfit there. It's also quite a feat to find something stylish yet warm on a very chilly January day here, but it looks like she did it, and of course it's important to note that she used an American designer. That's something that a lot of First Ladies do put some thought in. With the inaugural balls in the past, they often would choose a designer from America who had a story that they wanted to tell and highlight. We're not going to get that today, of course, since there isn't going to be a ball. But I also think the stylishness is something that a lot of people have talked about with Jill Biden, that this is a part of her character. Even her students have commented on her being a very fashion-forward person in the classroom. So I think we're getting our first taste of who Jill Biden will be as a First Lady and her character here.
And I mentioned that, there's the president, rather. I almost called him vice president. He is the president now, greeting it looked like the mayor of D.C. We saw a few moments ago the president talking to Mike Memoli of NBC News. Also, Al Roker got a little moment there with the president. But let's not overlook the Washington Post. Earlier in the Capitol today, our very own Paul Kane got a little shout out from President Biden, who said he hadn't seen him in a while. Paul Kane, of course, a congressional correspondent on our team. Joe Biden, a familiar face to many journalists and vice versa, because of all of his years working here in the Capitol and being a senator, as well as his 8 years in the vice presidency. We mentioned that Joe Biden's wearing Ralph Lauren, both for his overcoat as well as his suit. The First Lady is wearing, as Rhonda mentioned, an American designer as well, Alexandra O'Neill. And you see there the Biden family as they head towards the White House. James, the turnaround of the White House is really a remarkable feat, and kudos to the team that manages to pull this off. Always just a major transformation that has to happen, but never more so than this time because of COVID-19.
Yeah, so Libby, they really had to do a deep clean and use special chemicals, but also, they've replaced the pictures. I mean, that always happens, but the Trump folks, this is a small petty thing, but when the Obama folks left, there's all these picture frames in the building, and there were pictures of Obama and Barack and Michelle together all over, and the Obama people took the pictures of Obama out but left the picture frames. The Trump folks took the picture frames, so they took the pictures in the picture frames. But already the Biden team has replaced those pictures and frames and hung up new pictures of Joe and Jill Biden. And that's a small little thing, but they've redecorated the office. Joe Biden is going to come in and see a redecorated Oval Office in a few minutes, which is amazing considering that Trump was there just a few hours ago. They've put in new beds and box springs in the residence. They've had to sort of redo the residence. Donald and Melania Trump actually lived in separate bedrooms the last 4 years. The Bidens share a bedroom like most normal married couples, and will be in a residence that looks very different than the one Trump was in this morning.
Thank you so much, James. Let's go now to Joyce Coe, who's been at the White House all day today. Joyce.
Well, Libby, right now we are seeing the President Biden and his family walking in through the gates of the White House right now. Flanking them on both sides are guards with flags, state flags representing all 50 states, and they are walking into the music from the trumpets, and behind them is a limo that is following them. We have just been standing here watching below us. We're on this structure that they've built for the press to be on to witness the inauguration, and we've just been standing here and watching the procession today as this parade goes by. And there were a few moments when Joe Biden was walking down this Pennsylvania Avenue behind me before he got to the gates of the White House, and he stopped a couple of times. I think the first was for a member of the press, an NBC correspondent who had a question for him, and we couldn't hear what was going on because we're 3 stories high right now. But he stopped for a member of the press, as well as DC Mayor Muriel Bowser was here as well, and said, "Hi, Mr. President." He stopped and shook hands with her. And then he stopped a couple more times down the parade route before taking a left into the gates of the White House. We see the family approaching the front steps of the White House now, I believe. They are just standing there as the music is playing, and I think we're going to see what happens after this, but I'll send it back to you, Libby.
Joyce, even though Joe Biden spent a lot of time in this building as vice president, as sort of a counselor to President Obama, this is a whole new moment for him. This is his house now, Joyce.
Yeah, I mean, after 8 years serving as the vice president, 36 years as a senator, this is sort of the pinnacle of Joe Biden's political career. And, he's doing this very late in life, the oldest president to ever take office. And it's really incredible to watch him with his entire family. He has a very large family, and we know that he has had a very close relationship and talks about them whenever he can.
President Joe Biden, the First Lady, Dr. Jill Biden, and the rest of the Biden family entering the White House for their first time as Commander-in-Chief and First Lady. And there is the Howard University Marching Band getting ready to go, bringing a lot of joy and energy into this day. Rhonda, it's actually like a big weight that the Howard Marching Band and the Delaware Marching Band have to carry, because they're representing like all of the people who would normally be here celebrating and partying and showing their talents during the parade.
That's right. This is sort of their moment to shine, to carry on what would usually be a street filled with performers and bands from across the country. These two schools are leading the way, but it again injects that excitement that many Americans are feeling right now, seeing this new moment in history happen in America. And this is Howard University is Kamala Harris's alma mater. And you see the dancers there, the flag corps, and the drum corps carry on and start some of the music that we'll be hearing for the next few moments. But you're right, usually you would see many more bands, but these two schools are going to have to carry it for all of them.
Well, they'll do it well. James, you know, it's so exciting to see a president come from the University of Delaware, a state school, and to see the vice president come from a historically black, an HBCU, a historically black college university, Howard University, from right here in Washington, D.C., just showing, you know, that you don't have to have a strictly Ivy League education to make it to these highest jobs in America.
In America, anything is possible, and it is really cool. And it is.
It's so, you know, these are great schools, and so now they can, you know, count these two leaders as show prospective students in the future what their alums have gone on to do.
And President Biden leaned into that on the campaign trail. He said, "Look, I'm you know, from a state school. I understand. You know, I didn't go to an elite Ivy League school, and it is you know, that's just, it's a big part of his political appeal that he's from Scranton, that he came from a working class background, and he's actually the first president since Ronald Reagan not to have a degree from an Ivy League school, and this comes as Democrats have been increasingly struggling with kind of the beer track. You know, a lot of pundits talk about beer track versus wine track voters, and so Biden hopes that background, you know, the fact that Dr. Biden, you know, teaches at a community college, that sort of helps connect with some of those voters who have felt alienated from the Democrats at times in recent years.
And the Howard Marching Band, the Showtime Band, has, as we were just seeing, that drum line, also the flashy flag squad and the ooh la la dancers. It's just less than 1/3 of the band today for safety precautions, so you know that the rest of their team is cheering them on right now, Rhonda.
That's right, and it's really a moment too for these two schools to be highlighted in this way. Howard, in recent years, there have been reports about, you know, lack of funding that have gone to Howard and other HBCUs, and you know, a lower number of enrollment. But now this is putting this school, a very historic school, by the way, nationally historic as well as historic in D.C. It's putting it really on the map, reminding everyone that the vice president came from an HBCU. So it's an important moment to take in as well.
Absolutely. So Rhonda, in a little while we'll head to this virtual parade. What are you going to be watching for the virtual parade?
You know, I'm just so curious as to how they're going to put it together. I think we got a glimpse of the way that they could put together something like this when we watched the DNC back in August, the Democratic National Convention, and that was partially virtual as well. Many other performers did pre-taped performances, and there, of course, was that roll call that everyone talked about days later, where the delegates from each state, they went to landmarks and gave their votes to Joe Biden. So that was a moment that was highly produced, but it was moving in many ways. And I feel like we're going to see something like that too when we look at the virtual parade that's going to be happening in moments.
It's actually starting now, Rhonda. You see Connecticut was just there. Now we're checking out Louisiana.
A community-based organization that helps kids like me achieve our dreams. And Joe Biden must be proud because when he visited our home state of Louisiana, he invited us to be part of the celebration. I met Joe, and I know that he cared about making opportunities for everybody in America.
We're the Culver Academy's Black Horse Troop and Equestrians from Indiana, and this will be the 18th inaugural parade we are participating in, dating back to President Woodrow Wilson's first inauguration in 1913. Today we have 71 members and 67 horses joining us.
Howard Showtime Marching Band there. We're popping in and out of that virtual parade as well as what's happening live in the streets of Washington, D.C. We are awaiting the arrival of Vice President Kamala Harris and the second gentleman, Doug Emhoff, and Howard is leading the way for them.
shining.
We'll go to that virtual parade in full soon, but we want to see the Vice President as she arrives here. There she is, Vice President Kamala Harris. Just an incredible moment as she's greeted by her family. Her stepchildren, Cole and Ella Emhoff. Of course, there's the second gentleman, her husband, Doug Emhoff. So James, Kamala Harris will essentially work out of the Eisenhower Executive Office building, the EEOB as it's known, the building right next to the White House. Talk to us about, where the Vice President works, what she does, how this will go.
Yeah, so she'll live at the Naval Observatory, and Pence actually moved out over the weekend. So they have full run of that place. And she will have an office in the West Wing, but she will work out of the ceremonial office, which is a much bigger, more grand office in the taller building, just to the west of the White House. And she will have a sizable staff. She'll have the same suite of offices that Joe Biden had for 8 years, and she will end up spending a lot of time at the Senate, more than usual, because they're going to need her to break lots of votes that are party line votes. So even confirming judges, they're going to have her go to be the 51st vote. So that will she'll use her office in the Capitol quite a lot, and it'll be interesting to see what other portfolios she ends up getting, and how big her national profile is, at least initially. Obviously, she's such a historic figure that a lot of attention will be paid to anything that she does in ways that perhaps a normal vice president wouldn't experience.
Rhonda Colvin, you may be seeing a lot of Vice President Harris covering Capitol Hill as James lays out for us her important role as the president of the Senate. She'll go back and work with colleagues there, Rhonda, in the Senate, but she'll also face some tough adversaries on the Republican side of the aisle.
Right, she is in that role of the official tiebreaker, so that will likely require her to be very close to Washington, be close to the Hill, and be here for these close votes. So, some are saying hopefully the Senate won't get to a position where some of the more important legislation, like a potential COVID stimulus bill, or anything dealing with the economy, will be a very close vote, that would go through without having to involve her. But it is a part of her new job, and it's expected that she will likely have to be on hand.
James, in a lot of ways that will make Kamala Harris, the vice president, sort of even more visible and potentially influential. Contrast that with the role of Vice President Pence, who was really just, there to sort of do the bidding of Donald Trump in a way that just felt sort of very secondary, very submissive to Donald Trump. Kamala Harris obviously will be working with President Biden, but she'll appear to have a lot more agency in her role, just even in the physical act of being at the Senate, being there to break those ties.
Such a point, and she's going to really be a principal. And you're right about Pence. One of the things with Pence was he never wanted to get crosswise with Trump, and neither will Vice President Harris.
Just lost an earring. Sorry, if you're wondering what just happened. I think she might have dropped something there. Something dropped. So looks
That'd
like
be a first for
a good husband, Doug Emhoff, grabbed it and picked it up. So okay, back to you, James.
So she Pence was always afraid to be too out there, to say anything that could be perceived as implicit criticism of Trump. Of course, she won't want to be seen as criticizing Biden either, but I think she will be. Biden's fine with her having a bigger profile, with her traveling and doing things that aren't just totally subservient to him. And so I expect, especially because he's older, she'll be out doing a lot more around the country, especially during these first few months when we're still trying to get COVID under control.
Joyce Koh, let's go to you at the White House as we see the vice president make her way over to where you are.
Yeah, so Vice President Kamala Harris right now is walking just right past us with her family. And we heard her talk to some reporters that she's just walking to work. And she was greeting also D.C. Mayor Muriel Bowser, who also said hi to President Biden as he was walking by. I have to remark at the pretty amazing coats that she and her family are wearing. She's in purple, and you can just see her very clearly, like walking down and saying hi, waving to the few members that are in the crowd here. I can't imagine what this would be like with, just more people in the crowd as they are witnessing the Howard University Color Guard and marching band go past in preparation to see Kamala Harris taking her route down the parade route right now. Hold on one second. I'm just plugging in my my IFB. I can't hear anything that's happening, so I'm going to just toss it back to you, Libby, if you're talking to me.
Yeah, Joyce, we'll let you get situated for a moment so we can go back to you. We're seeing the Vice President wearing Christopher John Rogers, designer who posted on Instagram his gratitude and wrote, "We are so honored and humbled to have played a small part in this historic moment." Once again, a lot of these monochrome outfits getting so much attention and just being so stunning on a day where your eye and the camera sweeps through the crowd. Kamala Harris's stepdaughter, Ella, also getting a lot of fashion raves online for her very cool outfit. James, the sartorial choices here, as we've talked about, speak volumes to the message that leaders want to send. And James, Kamala Harris often tries to show designers of color, wear outfits by designers of color as she makes her fashion choices.
Yeah, and she does she's done a great job at promoting designers of color and American designers as well. Purple is a noteworthy choice. Obviously, a lot of history to that color. It conveys bipartisanship and the message of unity that is so overarching in the inaugural address and the whole theme of this week.
Joyce Coe, this team plans to get right back to work this afternoon. And let's go on to Rhonda Colvin. I think Joyce is sort of right there as this is all happening. So Rhonda, let's go to you instead. We've talked about how they plan to get to work right away. Kamala Harris has a role to play here today as well, in addition to President Biden.
That's right. She is expected to swear in the three newest members of the Senate, John Ossoff of Georgia, as well as Raphael Warnock of Georgia. They'll be sworn in later this afternoon, and then also her replacement from California, Alex Padilla, is also expected to take his oath. And it's going to be the same oath she took, actually. Senators, vice presidents, they all take the same oath, the same wording. So it'll just be a quick turnaround for her to kind of get back to business and to start her new role as vice president. And that's something, too, that is so symbolic of today, that there's a power shift happening right now in the Capitol, where you now have a Senate that is going to be 50-50, so half Democrat, half Republican. And what that will do is force at least a little bit of compromise, where we will have a majority leader in Chuck Schumer, but he will be working with the minority leader, Mitch McConnell, on committee assignments, procedural rules that the Senate follows. So there's going to have to be a little bit of compromise to get some of the internal work to set forth the new Senate. So she will be a part of that today, later today. And it goes to show you that there's so much work ahead for this administration. The fact that they are not even, it doesn't even appear to be stopping for a lunch break or a dinner break. They have to get to work immediately on many really crucial items.
Yeah, James, a great question as to when are they eating?
That was
How
actually,
are they taking care of themselves?
I hadn't thought about that at all.
Yes, yes.
And they have an aggressive agenda, not just for today, but for the first 10 days. And they really want to accomplish a lot. They want to show people that they're focused on getting to work, that they're moving forward. They also want to show that they're turning the page. The challenge there, of course, and it's been kind of pleasant that we haven't talked about Donald Trump in probably the last hour, who he's no longer president and is at Mar-a-Lago, but there still is the question of when is his impeachment trial going to start, and we don't know. The Senate is planning to confirm at least one or two of Biden's nominees, including his director of national intelligence. They're hoping to do that later today so that those people can be in place. But the Biden team wants to show they're focused on COVID, they're focused on the economy. They don't want to look like they're being backward looking. But of course, that is something that they have to address and deal with at some point in the coming days. So,
James, I just have to stop you to say, that was just a remarkable image we just witnessed, even among all this, political talk that we have to focus on. Seeing the first woman of color enter what will be her office, the office of the vice presidency there in the EEOB, the Eisenhower Executive Office Building, as we heard from our colleagues, just going to work. Just kind of a remarkable moment to see her supported by her husband. Mm-hmm. We've seen the flip opposite of that, of course, for generations now. The woman supporting the man as he goes to take on this tremendous challenge, and now we finally see the opposite of that.
Yeah, and I'm glad you've been calling out these moments, because that is a moment, Libby, and it is something I really do think. Ultimately, 50 years from now, we'll remember January 6th, but the history of today is Kamala Harris is the first female vice president. This is one of those stepping stones, along Nancy Pelosi becoming the first speaker. And we will have a woman as president probably sooner than later. And that image of her going to work in a building I'm not sure she's ever been in before, but is now essentially running, is a powerful image that I think speaks really loudly to lots of people around the country.
All right, James Hohmann, thank you. Let's go now to this parade across America, this virtual parade that is happening right now.
Bring it to his feet. Move mountains on. And I'll rise up, high like the waves, I will rise. In spite of the ache, I'll rise up, and I'll do it 1,000 times again. For you. We have each other, and for that we have each other. Yeah, we will rise, we'll rise, we'll rise. I will rise up. The waves, I will rise in spite of the ache. I will rise again. I will rise up high like the waves. I will rise in spite of the ache. I will rise again and again.
from Boone, North Carolina.
Chinese American Community Center from President Joe Biden's home state of Delaware. The strength of our nation comes from the rich diversity of the culture of the American people. And we are so honored and proud to share this performance with you today. Congratulations, Mr. President and Madam Vice President.
We are hockey players from the New Hampshire Seacoast,
led by the University of New Hampshire's mascot.
And we are thrilled to be in the parade across America.
And congratulations, President Joe Biden.
And congratulations to Vice President Harris.
My gosh, those were some amazing artists. Okay, our second hero next door is a fifth-generation Texan, a teacher who truly lives our Across America theme. To make her lessons come to life for her students, she took a road trip across America to show them the very places where historic moments happened. Here is Kathy Cluck.
I am a high school teacher in Austin, Texas, and in July, when I realized we would start the school remotely, I took the opportunity to take off and teach history from places where it happened. This morning, I'm in Jamestown. The students would tune in every day and just sort of see what my background was for that day, and it was a way for them really to see that history is still important, it still matters, it's not just in the pages of a textbook. This is Yorktown. Would not have won the war were it not for the help of the French. Sailed in right back there. They cut off the British. Cornwallis had to surrender. Boom. America born. Thanks, France. I was able to teach lessons to my high school kids about society, about how America is still changing. We're still in a process. It's been fun for the spotlight to be on teachers across the country who are working so hard to really make education happen and productive, even though we're doing it during a pandemic. We're there for each other and we can be there for each other, and I think that was pretty much the message.
We are Mariachi Hoya from Las Vegas High School, proud to represent Nevada in the parade across America. Although we can't perform together, we prepared a special performance for you.
Y lindos árabes se encuentran la historia de mis raíces y tradiciones. Ay, 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 como quiero a mi mariachi. En mero tierra caliente, Nayarit y Michoacán. La tierra
Biden and Vice President Harris, felicidades.
Now let's watch Vice President Harris and her husband Douglas Emhoff entering the north grounds of the White House, making their way towards the north portico to make their very first entrance into the White House as Vice President and Second Gentleman of the United States of America.
Vice Presidential motorcade carrying
Well, that was historic. A number of today's participants have been in more than 2 previous inaugural parades. In fact, there is a participant today who has been in 6, and his colleague has been in 5. They are Jack and Thomas, 2 horses from Culver Academy. This year's parade features several equestrian groups with a long history of performing for our nation's presidents. Joining us for their 4th appearance at an inauguration is Michigan's multi-jurisdictional mounted police drill team. With their 2nd appearance are members of the American Side Saddle Association, and Culver Academies is making their 18th appearance. Now, I learned a lot doing my inauguration research. For example, I learned that Thomas Jefferson rode his own horse to the Capitol. Andrew Jackson arrived at his ceremony in a horse-drawn carriage, while Abraham Lincoln's carriage was escorted by civilians on horseback. And once again, horses and their riders are adding a majesty and grace to this quadrennial event. With us next on our Parade Across America are some of the talented stars of the Ryan Martin Foundation, which is part of the National Wheelchair Basketball Association. They're joined by Elena Della Dawn from the WNBA's Washington Mystics and the NBA's Grant Hill and Chris Paul.
This has been a time where we've all had to overcome challenges, when we've all had to adapt to what life throws at us, but our American spirit allows us to have hope. It allows us to thrive. And now, joining us for the Parade Across America are the basketball stars of the Ryan Martin Foundation.
I'm Grant Hill, and that is quite